Hey guys, it's Dan. Welcome back. This is a display board that I made a little over a year ago. However, over that time, I've taken it to a number of events and it's gotten pretty banged up. I've had like trees fall off and some of the foam rocks and stuff have chipped away. So I wanted to come back and fix it up a little bit because I have an event that I'll be taking it to next weekend. And while I was at it, I really was never super happy with the like aesthetic of the board. I think it looks cool enough. However, it has kind of like a peaceful and Shire-like vibe to it. And I wanted it to look more like the edge of a battlefield and maybe just be a little bit more dingy looking. So I'm going to go through and like dirty up the river a little bit. I want to add a footbridge for display purposes. So I'll get to all that. But the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to go through and fix up, I'd mentioned some of these like broken trees that have fallen out. I do recommend if you're doing this yourself, especially for larger stuff, you want to get like a hot glue gun. As I said, though, I'm trying to get this done for an event next weekend, so I don't have time to go pick up some hot glue sticks. And then, there's a few aquarium plants and stuff that have fallen out. For this kind of work, I would use super glue, which is what I'm doing here. But again, for larger stuff like bushes and trees, I think that it's better to use hot glue for a number of reasons. And these are just aquarium plants that I found at Walmart. I think it was like $3 or $4 for a giant bag of this stuff that I'll probably never be able to use all of. And there's because I've used this display board a number of times now, I have a really good idea of like where I can place units on it, where I can place models, and some of the areas where I cannot. So what I'm doing is I'm adding more foliage. I've got a really great selection of small trees and bushes and stuff. As I've mentioned, I think in my Temu video, I pretty much every time I go to the hobby store, I'll pick up some like basing supplies. And so as a result, I've got a large collection of like shrubs and tufts, foliage, stuff like that I can lean on for projects like this, which is great because I think can create some pretty convincing looking diverse ecosystems here, fake ecosystems, if you've got a lot of kind of grasses and stuff that you can use and mix up together for projects like this. It's a shame that I didn't start ramping up my YouTube channel when I was building this, again, about a year ago. I did take some photos of it, put it on forums, but I never made a video. However, maybe down the road I'll make another display board and kind of show you start to finish how I got to this point anyway. And then this river is a little bit too happy looking. Oh, not there yet. We're under the static grass. This static grass, you will know if you did watch that Temu video, I did end up mixing the dark green and that like tannish brown color in. And I think that did help quite a bit with making the colors look a little bit more diverse. It still has a little bit of a sheen to it, but I figured this is as good a place as any to use it because the static grass that's on here is kind of patchy looking. I didn't want to use up all my Army Painter static grass on this project when I did it. So if you've never dealt with applying static grass kind of at this scale, it's the same as like a small miniature. I would just water the glue down a little bit more maybe than you would. This is like a 1-to-1 ratio of dirty paint water and some Elmer's glue. And then I usually work in sections, kind of like a 6x6 area, just because the glue will start to dry, and then I'll sprinkle some static grass over it. If I do start expanding out my terrain selection, I think I will invest in one of those tools that I can only really describe like a colander that has a low-level electrical current that runs through it, just with like a double or a AAA battery. But what it does is you then sprinkle the static grass through it and it charges the static grass so that when it hits whatever you're trying to apply it to, it stands straight up, which is really cool for making like fields and stuff like this where you're not just making tufts. You want to have like a lot of grass that's laid down. It makes a very convincing effect, I think. So I do think if I continue with this kind of work, I'll pick up one of those because I just think they're cool. And this is what I was talking about with the river just a moment ago, which is that this river is kind of pleasant and bubbling along, and I wanted to make it more grimy and swamp-like. So what I'm going to do, this is kind of a poor man's version of water effects. I do recommend water effects if you've never dealt with them before. They're actually super easy to use. However, I don't have any, as I keep saying. I'm trying to get this ready for an event next weekend. So you can do, I think, in the end, what will look kind of convincing, especially if you're doing shallow water like this, a convincing pseudo water effect here. And so what I'm going to do, it's 3 steps, I should say. The first step, I typically use a little bit of Elmer's glue, or quite a bit of Elmer's glue that I'm going to put down as a base layer here. This gives it a little bit more body. So I'm going to mix up, I threw in some Buelltan Green and some Agrex Earthshade. This is just going to be, we want a nice dark base layer for the bed of the stream here, which is what I'm doing. You could just use paint. You don't have to use glue, but again, it gives it, I think, a little bit more volume, even though it is going to dry quite flat, and it'll have a matte finish to it. But again, there's going to be that. We're going to do a highlight step, and then we're going to add a gloss layer on top of it that will make, I think, a pretty realistic looking, kind of grimy looking stream is what we're going to be trying to make. So I'm applying it with a brush and doing the rough shape of the stream that I want to do here. And then what I'll do at the end is I'm going to mix in more water and then pour it over. And what will happen is the more liquid version of this like paint glue mixture is going to kind of follow the pattern that we've laid out with our brush here. But that's all I'm doing. I'm going through and just, and then there's a stone bridge over on the right. I'm going under the stone bridge on both sides and just kind of mapping out where I want the stream to be. And this is going to create a nice dark base layer for us to do a highlight layer once this dries. And then we can add that gloss effect, as I mentioned. You would want to do something similar for using water effects. I'm not using them here, so I won't like detail that process too much, but you do want to do like a layer of whatever color you want it to be, because gloss or water effects are clear unless you mix in like some pigment. And then I had these tufts also from Temu that I thought this would also be a good place as any to use. I'm kind of filling in some of the crevices there. I also sometimes will tactically put them like, I put some bushes down that have just bare plastic trunks. So I'll kind of cover up the base of the trunk there by putting some of these shrubs down. But as I mentioned, I have a good idea of where I can't place units on this board anyway. So I'm building those areas up with extra foliage just to make it look a little bit overgrown. And then, yeah, I just put these down with super glue. And I think that they look pretty neat. And then this will be another example of me sacrificing a finished model for the sake of projects. As I said, I wanted this to have, like, kind of look like it's on the edge of a battlefield, so I thought a dead goblin in the river would help sell that. And it will also, because I can had some like blood going down the river, I think we'll have like pop of color kind of toward the middle of the board here. So all I did was like lob the leg off. I glued him down up against a rock there to make it look like that's where he fell. And then we're going to use out of the pot blood effects here. And as I said, I wanted to create like a pool of blood around him, and I wanted to look kind of like it's running down the stream. And so we're going to use blood effects. Be sure if you do something like this, you want to, anytime you touch the glue mixture, wash your brush so that you're not getting Elmer's glue and paint into your blood for the blood gut effects or whatever, like Tamiya clear red, whatever you're using. And then what I'll do is take some Carroburg Crimson shade and kind of run that down the stream away from him. And the truth is, I actually don't know if this is going to work or not. I'm making this up as I go, and I've said in other painting videos, like, don't be afraid to like experiment and sort of play around. It's very rare that you do something that can't be undone. And even when I'm dealing with like water effects and stuff here, I will take risks sometimes just to kind of see what happens. Figure it can't really hurt. But this is what I'm doing here. I'm using the Carroburg Crimson and just kind of creating streaks going down that glue. And again, I'm washing the brush out each time so I don't get any of that glue mixture into my crimson shade. But yeah, again, don't be afraid to try stuff out, even if you're not sure it's going to work. Kind of enjoy the process. This is supposed to be fun. So anyway, that's all I'm doing here. We'll see how that looks when it dries. And then while that's drying, it's going to need probably 24 hours to dry because it's a lot of liquid. And I want to create a little footbridge toward the middle here because I usually have like infantry heavy armies for the game system that I play and take armies to on this display board. And so as a result, I need a lot of like square inches here for units to be deployed on this display board. And I found several times I would have like a movement tray kind of spanning that width of stream there. So I thought a footbridge here would make sense. So all I did, I broke up some balsa strips too that kind of look like a roughly hewn like tree trunk or something like that, and then some kind of matchstick looking balsa strips that I'm putting down to make it look like planks. And it's good to like mix up the sticks too if you do something like this, especially if you're trying to make a kind of rickety looking bridge like I'm doing here. Just so that none of them are going to be like flush against each other when you glue them down. And yeah, there's no like science to it or anything like that, but I probably made it to like 50% wider than I would if this were just like a regular piece of terrain, because as I said, this is supposed to be functional. I want to have like a unit on a movement tray standing on that bridge. And then I did a little test over on the side with Agrex Earthshade on just this balsa wood, and it didn't darken it down enough. So what I switched to is this Skeleton Horde contrast paint, and it really did darken it down quite a bit. It's like wood stain, and I think it ended up creating this nice kind of mahogany look to it. So yeah, I just gave the whole thing a bath, and then while I was at it, while I had that out, you might have noticed over on the stone bridge, I did some weathering work to look kind of like wagon wheel tracks or something going over it. And I wanted to do something similar over here with this footbridge to make it look like, again, like my army's been fording this river and churning up the dirt and the grass and kind of creating mud on either side of the footbridge. So all I'm doing is just, you can see, just dabbing some Skeleton Horde. You could use Agrex Earthshade, some kind of wash, and just dabbing it into some of this static grass and rocks and stuff, and creating, you can see kind of like a darkened area where it looks like a lot of feet have been treading on the ground there. And I added a little bit more of that over on the footbridge side too, or the stone bridge side. And this is the next day, so everything's dry. You can see we've got a nice dark base layer in the riverbed there. But before we get to that, you can see there's a couple of spaces kind of in between the gaps on those planks where the bare balsa wood, like the wash didn't get down into it. So I'm just taking a detail brush with some Agrax and finishing up the areas that need to be darkened down. We're going to then do a dry brush on this bridge, but we'll get to that once this all dries. I said I wanted it to be kind of like a swampy river, so I'm going to take Nurgle's Rot as my highlight color here. You can do whatever you want. If you wanted it to be more bluish, you would use like a lighter blue color as your highlight layer here, sticking kind of toward the center of the riverbed here. And yeah, I'm going to go all the way down and do the exact same thing I did with my Elmer's glue, which is kind of create the rough path of where I want the stream to be going. And then I'm going to water down the Nurgle's Rot. I've had this paint for a while. I haven't known what to do with it, so I had no problem with just kind of sacrificing the rest of the pot here. But I watered it down and I just pour over the pastier version of the technical paint that I put down. And that's going to dry a much darker color. But anyway, while that's drying, the Blood for the Blood God effects, I'm going to build up a little bit more too. Because as I said, the final step here is we're going to take some gloss I just picked like a big bottle of it up from Hobby Lobby for pretty cheap. I think it was like $4 or something. But I'll get to that once this step all dries. But again, I wanted to have more like blood kind of flowing down the river here. So we're going to do a little bit more of what we did the day before. Just kind of building up this blood effect. Again, being very careful to wash the brush out each time so I don't get Nurgle's Rot into my Blood for the Blood God paint. And then we're going to let that dry. And while I have these blood effects out, I wanted to create, again, kind of the story here is that my army's kind of routed. This is sort of skirmishes happening on the edges of a battlefield. So added some blood effects onto the side of the bridge here. And as with any like technical paint work like this, again, my normal advice is to not go overboard. You can always add more later. But again, just creating a little bit of a story here that maybe there was a fight on the bridge. And yeah, if you saw my Blood for the Blood God tutorial video, or blood effects tutorial video, you'll know what I'm doing there. And then I'm taking some khaki paint. This is apple barrel paint. I do recommend like Walmart apple barrel paint for all of your basing kind of work, just because it's cheap and it's effective. You don't want to use your Citadel paint or any other like Vallejo kind of paint for this. But this is khaki. It's a nice like tannish brown color. And I'm just dry brushing over the bridge. Don't worry about these streaks. We're going to do a wash layer at the end that will take most of those out. But this happens anytime you dry brush over like a flat surface. This is going to pick up some nice highlights on these old wood boards here. And then we're going to switch to a color called Parchment, which is a nice like off-white, almost white, very bright bone color that we're going to do an even lighter dry brush of onto the bridge here. And for those that have seen maybe my other basing videos or painting videos, I do talk a lot about dry brushing very light colors, like even white over a base. And I do strongly recommend that. But if you're afraid to, maybe start with something like this, like a parchment color, like a very light bone color. And I do mean like a dusting. And you can see me here shifting from that bridge to some of the stone and the rock areas. But what it does is it blends together, especially if you've got lots of like tough foliage, if you've got grasses and stuff that are different colors. Having a nice bright color that is the same color as a highlight for all those things helps to kind of tie them all together too. I don't know, I'm sure there's like an artistic technical term for what's happening, but I do find that it helps quite a bit just to do a single very bright highlight over the entirety of a base. And then I mentioned we're going to do a wash on this old bridge, and that will knock out a lot of the like brighter streaks that are on this bridge. So I'm just taking some Agrax, and I'm going to water it down a little bit, and I'm just going to wash all of these boards. You're kind of sticking toward the center a little bit to make it look like that's the more worn area of the bridge. But just a single thin coat of Agrax over this bridge. And then I don't know what happened to my footage here. I had a stage where it showed the dried Nurgle's rod. All I did after that is I did just a thin wash of, it was like Agrax Earthshade mixed with a little bit of blue wash. And once that dried, I then used this stuff. This is called like Liquid Tex or something. It's just gloss varnish in a bottle. It's a little bit more watered down than Art Coat. But there it was. I just poured it on, and that shot we had there was after like 5 hours, and then this is overnight. It's completely dried. You can see, I think, makes a pretty convincing water effect. So not bad. There you go. There's our finished display board, ready to display miniatures and ready for my game next weekend. Or I realize this is also kind of a nice little mini board for games like Lord of the Rings, or one of my favorites is Warhammer Skirmish, which you can find at the back of the 6th edition rulebook, or if you have the pamphlet that they released. This is like kind of like a watered down version of Mordheim, if you've never played it. It's quite fun to play with a friend, or if you're me, sometimes play by yourself. So anyway, appreciate you guys dropping by for this one. As ever, I'm going to have, as I keep mentioning, I have some more reviews to do. I have a painting video almost ready to go, and probably some battle reports from the game next weekend. So appreciate you stopping by, and until next time, happy gaming.